The two chief religions at this time were Methodist and Baptist, founded by the Wesley brothers and John Smith, respectively. Although there were blacks by thousands getting baptized in the 17th and 18th century, it was done so only to get the slave masters off of our backs. The two denominations still had a problem fully instructing our people because of the language barrier. This is where Moors fit in perfectly as buffers. Charles C. Jones stated in his writings the first time he heard the harmonic voices of our people as they sung together in unison, it captivated him. He never heard a sound and harmony so pleasant. At this time, there were only two different books for religion. There was the Bible, which consisted of the Old and the New Testament, and then there was a book of songs, which was hymns, songs. It was the songs that captured our people. He wrote, "The Negroes above all the human species that I ever knew have an ear for music and a kind of ecstatic delight in psalmody, and there are no books they learn so soon or take so much pleasure in." Immediately, the missionaries, black and white, understood the way to get to our people was with sound and show. To this day, they still get us with sound and show. The society then opened a theology school in Charleston, South Carolina, in which every year they taught 20 selected Negroes who would go on and to operate as clergymen, pastors, bishops, reverends, who had to teach the indigenous blacks of this nation Christianity. The kicker was that you had to be a Moor to get into this theology school. Sunday schools were then commissioned to teach our people the English language through biblical instruction. So in part, our people were taught literacy through the means of Christianity. This not only taught them the English language, it taught them the doctrines and catechisms of Christianity. It taught to obey masters and slave owners, which was not the word of God. These were doctrines implemented by popes, not white popes. I'm talking black popes. These men allowed the justification of slavery to be embedded in what we call the Bible. As documentation, you can read 3 papal bulls justifying slavery against all black nations, as well as cursing them. The Dum Diversas of 1452, the Romanus Pontifex of 1455, and the Intera Caetera of 1493. These are the orders from the Pope. So when the Bible speaks of the cursed tribes, such as the Canaanites, the Cushites, the Hamites, the Shemites, etc., these were black people cursed by the man, not God.
Prior to 1821, blacks were slowly recruited into the clergy. Churches were built, creating a stronghold in every state, but Florida was not one. Savannah, Georgia, Charleston, South Carolina, and Philadelphia were the major religious hubs, and they were positions held by black men. Absalom Jones and Richard Allen founded the African Methodist Episcopal Church. In 1794, Allen and Jones would form their own Methodist Episcopal Church while adding African to its title, creating Mother Bethel African Methodist Episcopal Church of Philadelphia. This is considered the first black church in America.
Now, Bishops Richard Allen and Absalom Jones were indeed Moors, although history called them slaves, but you have to ask real questions. Where did they get financing for the new AMA church? How were they able to sustain themselves financially? Where did you get this money from all of a sudden if you was formerly a slave? It wasn't hard to find that information. President George Washington, Dr. Benjamin Rush funded these two black men. And we all know that George Washington was a savage. He was a slave owner. He was a slave master. He did not like abolitionists. He did not like black people, period. So why is he funding two black men to start up a church? At the height of slavery, a racist, savage, and slave owner like Washington helped fund a black church. You had to be real good buddies for a favor like that. But what was the value? These are questions that we just have to answer. Our souls trapped in spirituality was the value. Strip us of our souls and we become mentally enslaved until we break those chains. Until then, the religion of Christianity will keep us in bondage.
The AME Church was officially consecrated in 1816 as Bishop Richard Allen became the first bishop of the African Methodist Episcopal Church. This began a turnstile of black pastors entering into plantations as salary-earning servants, with the only job to teach indigenous blacks the English language via the Bible. Sunday schools was already established nationwide in 1790 by the Baptist Church. By 1800, black pastors were rising up by large numbers itself. However, there was a system involved with sermons. In those times, there were no freelancing sermons. Each pastor nationwide would receive a specific sermon to instruct the indigenous blacks that was drafted from the diocese of the church.
What most people fail to know is that true Florida natives didn't experience slavery. Florida was the last state to be colonized for the United States in 1821. We experienced Jim Crow. Prior to this time, we were free and abundant. So when people say Florida is the craziest state, that's because we have always been rebellious towards colonizers. Always. Even when Florida became part of America, our people were free. The rules of slavery didn't apply to us. Getting control of Florida through wars was the bigger and more expensive than any American war ever, and these are facts. The planters and slave owners, they moved into Florida from various states with their slaves, such as Isaiah D. Hart, Jesse Turner, who is the father of Lem Turner, Isaac Hendricks, and etc. These people still have bridges and streets of their name emblazoned on. However, in the late 1700s, missionaries from the Baptist and AME sect were sent to Florida to start congregations and churches on their own. Behind them came armies and wars against the Maroons of Florida, wrongly titled the Indian War. These were wars against indigenous blacks, and the black Moorish rebels were on the enemy side. In Jacksonville particularly, the instruction of religion started in the late 1760s when the British took control of Florida for a 20-year period. A lot of blacks, Moors particularly, ushered in Jacksonville and created the African Society, and where the teaching of the indigenous blacks of Jacksonville was one of their main objectives in teaching the English language. The Bible was the only curriculum.
If you viewed the previous 3 episodes of the Black Duval, you should know how much of an influence black people had over this city. It's odd that the most influential were reverends or bishops. If you look at most historic black colleges, they started as religious schools or education ministries, which later evolved into normal schools, then accredited institutions we call historic black colleges. For example, the 3rd bishop of the AME Church was Edward Waters. Why would a college be named after a bishop? The origins of Edward Waters College was that it was a normal school where you were taught the ideology of that time society section of Christianity before Bishop Charles H. Pierce was sent to Florida to start that education ministry. This Methodist church went on to become Edward Waters College.
Dig deeper into the history of the first black clergy in America, they all have the same mainstream story. They bought themselves out of slavery and rose to prominence. That's a blanket lie to erase black people out of the respective commentary of history. When you research further, these prominent black men were not indigenous to America. For the most part, they were British, European citizens with African ancestry who came to America to set up a Western government to rule and conquer the indigenous black natives. So in retrospect, the Moors came to America to help set up a government and eventually rule over the indigenous blacks of this land. The white Europeans played in the background. So they positioned themselves strategically
And at the right moment, which seems to be the mid-1700s, they took the power away from the Moors after most of the dirty work of converting the indigenous blacks was accomplished. For example, Charles H. Pierce, the founder of Edward Waters College, was indeed a Moor, and he was of British citizenship. This was revealed when he was elected to the Constitutional Convention, but white opponents revealed he was not a citizen of America, which disqualified him from that election position. When Pierce made it to Florida, he had to secure funding to build his ministry school. Where did he get this funding? Who provided the capital for Pierce to start up his ministry school? Now, when I looked this up and I found out who all was his donors, it was nothing but white people. Lieutenant Governor William Gleason, State Treasurer Simon Conover, and General Milton Littlefield. All of these men have sketchy backgrounds. All of them have sketchy backgrounds. And he had to have some type of relationship with these men to get that funding. Now, Christianity has been a tool of oppression, and Bishop Pierce was an usher of that oppression, and everybody else who followed him. There's no denying that fact.